appreciate y'all. Thanks for joining us. So Vance, I met you, I guess earlier this year before all the craziness, or maybe late last year. And just in passing outdoors, I was leading a really small group of folks looking for birds, and he was out with all his gear that I had no idea what it was. He looked pretty cool though, and we stopped, we chatted, and he's a super nice guy. I looked him up on Instagram, and then immediately, fell in love with his pictures. But just in that short time of getting to know him, I knew he would be perfect for teaching a class. Very personable, one of the nicest guys out there, and one of the most talented guys that I know in terms of photography. So, well, and now you see the pictures here, and you know what I'm talking about. So. This is Vance. Vance, thank you. And I am going to stop my video, but I will pop up from time to time as questions come in and interrupt Vance, and we'll get those questions answered. All right. Thanks, Vance. Take it away, buddy.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. It's really, really exciting to have so many of you guys from all over the world here to tune in about wildlife photography. I would just start with saying that photography is an art. So it's subjective, and it's okay if you don't like all my photos, and it's okay if you don't like everything that I'm saying. Like I said, it's an art, so your opinions are fine. Also with photography, it can be a very in-depth and technical topic, and that's not what this class is. This class is for everyone. So if you have any questions about gear or technical stuff or post-processing, please save all those questions for the end. I left a good chunk of time there at the end for questions like that. But if you have any questions relating to what I'm talking about, please go ahead and ask those in the chat box, and Jay will come in and ask those questions for you. So in this class, I'm going to talk about 3 basic principles of photography that have really, really improved my photography. And those are lighting, perspective, and animal behavior. But first, I'm going to go ahead and get started with a little bit about myself. Like Jay said, my name is Vance Solseth. I'm absolutely in love with wildlife, have been my entire life. It's really kind of an obsession of mine. And I started photography in high school, but going back to that subjective thing, my teacher in high school didn't think my photos were very good. So I ended up getting a C in the class, and put down the camera for a few years after that. After college, I moved to Roatan, Honduras to be a scuba instructor. And that's actually where I picked up the camera again with the idea that I was going to sell my photos to my scuba divers of them and the dive sites. But, being there, being in the water, I came back to the animals again and again. Like I said, it's an obsession of mine. It's why I started scuba diving in the first place. All the amazing things in the ocean. So I started taking pictures, more and more pictures of the animals. But then I kind of got this desire to improve my photos. So I started looking at, what makes a photo good and what captivates people with photography. So I did a research, and I started trying to think about light and artistic composition and stuff like that to really, elevate my photography. And that's when I took this picture, and this picture, absolutely ignited the fire inside me to take better pictures. So, this was the picture that did it for me. After I moved back from Roatan back to Lexington, South Carolina, I was really, really excited about photography, and I kind of dove headfirst into it. So I've spent the last year and a half now researching and practicing, mostly through just going out there and trying it and failures, but a lot of stuff, a lot of additional resources, a lot of reading about photography and stuff like that. So through that, I learned lots in the year and a half. So this class is about some of those concepts and principles that I learned. And the first major concept, and arguably the most important concept in wildlife photography and photography in general, is light. It's a very in-depth topic. They teach entire college courses on lighting, just on studio lighting. But so we'll go on, and I want you guys to start thinking about photography as its root word. And so if you actually break it down, photography means light drawing. And as you can see here, there's two very, very different lighting conditions. So as wildlife photographers, we're not in a studio, we're outside and we're at mercy of the elements and the lighting situations that we're given. So this can be a big advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is you don't have to, rearrange your lights. What you have is what you get. But it also gives us a disadvantage because we don't have that control, and we have to be able to adjust on the fly with the lighting conditions that we're given. So I'm going to go through now a couple of time periods during the day and just talk about those and how that light affects our photography. And the first one is golden hour. And you all might be familiar with this term, golden hour. It's the hour immediately following the sunrise and the hour right before sunset. I put hour in quotation marks because it's not always an hour. It depends where you are in the world. Right now in South Carolina, along, closer to the equator, we're going to have faster golden hours. They're typically about 45 minutes right now. But if you go to Alaska right now, summertime in Alaska, the sun sets so slow that you can have 4 hours of golden hour sometimes. But this is considered the highest quality of light for photography. And that's just because it's diffusing through the atmosphere, which gives it less contrast, and it kind of gives it a little bit of warmer glow. You see here with this beautiful wood duck, the sun just hitting the trees behind it, and then just a really nice, even lighting on its face. It looks really appealing. It's the closest we get out in the wild to studio lighting. And you can see if you zoom in a little bit closer on this duck, you can really see how that light accentuates those details on the feathers, and there's not a lot of harsh contrast. So a couple more examples of this golden hour light with wildlife photography. We got the great crested flycatcher and a great horned owl. One of these was taken in the morning, and one of them was taken in the evening golden hour. I actually took the great crested flycatcher in the morning, and you can see that golden light coming through those trees really nicely, lighting up the eye of the bird and the face of the bird, and the same thing with the great horned owl. So just really nice lighting. It's coming through the trees a little bit, and it's okay if it comes through the trees. You can still get that really nice lighting effect. So even if you're deep in the forest, we have a beautiful prothonotary warbler. I know this is one of Jay's absolute favorite South Carolina birds, and it's easy to see why. They're really, really bright in our dark swamps. But that golden light that's coming in there is just a nice light. And my favorite time of the day, if I am going out to shoot photos, I like to be there before sunrise. So when that sun first comes up, you can take advantage of that full hour of golden light. So you might have heard through other photographers or other photography materials that the sun always needs to be behind you for your pictures. And that's if you want one of those really well, studio light shots. But I'm going to challenge that and say you can get some really, really interesting shots with the sun behind your subject and in front of you. We refer to that in the photography world as backlighting. So like I said, there's sometimes situations where the bird is not going to be where you want it to be always. So don't get discouraged if the sun is not behind you and it's behind your subject, because still some really interesting things can happen. Like you never would have been able to see these fine wing feathers on this stick sisal if that light wasn't there. And this is another example of backlight. This would have been a gorgeous picture if I was on the other side of this great blue heron. You would have gotten that really nice feather details. You would have really see its blue color and stuff, but that's not where I was. And also I wanted something a little bit more unique, something a little bit more artistic. And I really, really wanted to see those bugs that were flying around this, this great blue heron's head and that nice golden outline of it. So this is a good example of backlight in the golden hour. So moving on from golden hour, we have the blue hour. And blue hour refers to the time just before the sunrise and just after the sunset. You started to lose some color and some light, and you can see where it gets its name on this picture of that little barred owl down at the bottom of this gigantic snag. Yeah, so it's blue because there's not a lot of light coming in from the sun, which is making those colors stand out. But sometimes we see some really cool stuff. You know, this is when animals start to become active and start moving around and going about their day, or in this case, just ending their night, like the barred owl. But you never know what you're going to see. So it's important to understand that you can still take advantage of the blue hour. And I took this one after the sun went down. It's a little American alligator. You can see that blue still coming in. But like I said, you can get some really cool colors with it. So don't get discouraged if the sun is not there. You can still get a good picture. You might have to compensate for your camera a little bit. But yeah, some really interesting stuff. I saw a lot of people from North Carolina that logged in, so you might be familiar with this area. This was taken in Cataloochee Valley in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. If you guys ever get a chance to get up there, do it. It's amazing for wildlife photography, especially the bigger animals. They have a beautiful herd of elk up there and some bears and stuff. But, you know, the blue hour, again, kind of gives it this really, you know, it gives it a lot of mood and atmosphere in this photo. You can tell it's, you know, misty in the mountains and the Great Smoky Mountains, and it really gave a sense of place for this photo. So take advantage of what you're given. Go out before the sunrise, stay out past the sunset. You never know what you're going to see or what you're going to get. All right, so this next time period I kind of grouped into two sections, but it's all during the midday light, and you can either have direct sunlight and overcast. And the whole point of this section is don't get discouraged when you have direct light. Direct light is considered the worst light you can have, only because there's harsh shadows, while overcast is considered, in some people's opinions, the best form of light. All right, so I took this picture in very, very harsh direct sunlight, and this was the first time I ever went to Donnelly Wildlife Management Area, and it was the first time I actually had ever seen roseate spoonbill, so I was very excited. I knew the light wasn't great, and I knew I wouldn't be able to do these birds justice, but I worked with what I could. You can see under the bird around here, you know, very, very harsh shadows. Most of the time you see these pictures of these birds and they're in this gorgeous soft light and their pink is so pretty, but I worked with what I had. I knew I was able to get some action shots, so I compensated on my camera to get the bird the best I could, but not ideal, but you can still work with it. Also, I don't do much of this, but a lot of people love that direct sunlight and that really, really harsh lighting, because it looks really good in black and white. You know, black and white looks better with, you know, high contrast. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe you want to consider going out and getting more pictures in direct sunlight. It's just something that I've never personally have messed around with too much. Another solution you can have in direct sunlight is find something that's in the shade. This little flycatcher was in the shade, and you can see in the background there, the sun beating down on the trees that are in the background. So, you know, work with what you have. If you're shooting birds and you go into the forest, you can shoot all day in direct sunlight. You just have to be careful if that bird flies into an area with lots of sun, that you might get some harsh shadows in there. Overcast, like I said, is a completely different story. Overcast is my favorite time to shoot, because especially for songbirds, again, this prothonotary warbler, really nice, even lighting. But the best part to me about shooting in overcast is that you can be out there all day long. So actually, if I'm making a day trip to, a place, if I'm driving down to Charleston or Bear Island or someplace like that, I'm actually crossing my fingers for overcast just so I can, create good pictures all day long, as opposed to calling it quits around noon. Some more examples of nice overcast light. We got a tree swallow there. They look really good in overcast because you can get the nice blues without any harsh shadows. And then you can see the deer there with nice lighting. All right, so overcast light can have some really, really crazy effects if you're ever shooting on the water. Buffleheads are incredible birds. And I knew when this bufflehead, I saw it swimming close by, I knew I really wanted to accentuate its beautiful iridescent plumage in its face. So I compensated for my camera again and kind of made it a little bit brighter than it should be. But what that is the white is actually the gray sky that's reflecting off that water and making some cool effects. And here's another good example of some crazy effects that overcast light can have. And I'll just explain to you what's going on and how I got these bright bands across this picture for this American avocet. I took this down in Bear Island Wildlife Management Area. That's another one of the gems of South Carolina that's always good for wildlife photography. But what's happening here is the white bands are actually very shallow areas, and that's where the avocet is feeding. And that light is actually reflecting back at my camera, while the dark areas are areas that are deeper and calmer, and that's actually absorbing some of the light. So that's what gave it this crazy banded look. So, don't be afraid to experiment. I took this picture. It was a happy accident there. And so.
Can I interrupt you there, Vance?
Yeah, perfect timing.
So when you say you compensate in your camera, what type of settings?
Okay, so settings, there's a bunch of different ways you can control your settings, and it can be a long topic. Going into exposure theory and stuff could take a while. But what I'm doing is I'm purposely making the image brighter with my camera. So, we'll go back to this. I purposely made the image brighter so I could see details on the bird. And so this was a perfectly blue background, but with my camera, I increased my shutter speed, and you can increase your aperture also to darken the image down manually to get the look that you want.
Okay, and this might be, you might have already answered this with what you just said, but it says you mentioned compensating for harsh light with your camera. In harsh lighting, are you using exposure compensation features of your camera or an ND filter, for example?
So I don't ever use an ND filter unless I'm shooting like landscape or something, but this is a wildlife class, so I'm not using an ND filter on any of my wildlife lenses. I do use my camera exposure compensation, but I also shoot a lot in manual mode, and that's what I mostly do. So I'm actually compensating with the ISO, the shutter speed, and the f-stop.
And I'll get to this one last question, and I'll let you go. But I think you were going to talk about this stuff afterwards, but it's here now. But could the shadows be altered in post editing?
Yes. So
Okay.
to an extent, and if we have post processing questions, that's a whole nother thing, and that I will go to at the end. But there's only so much you can do in post processing to fix shadows if they're not there. Some people's editing styles, my editing style, I try to accurately display what I saw in the actual scene. So I don't do crazy light manipulation after I take the picture. But you can't fix bad light in your photo, but you can alter it a little bit. All right, so moving on to the next subject, creating your own light. I put this section in here just in case we have anybody who shoots macro photography. It's something I dabble in a little bit. You can create your own light for bird photography too. It's much more difficult, and I don't have the gear to do it. So for this section, creating your own light, it's all going to be macro photos. Okay, so these two spiders I took in Congaree National Park, and if you've ever been to Congaree, you know that it's extremely dark there in the summertime just because there's so many tall, beautiful trees. But so both these pictures I actually lit with my phone light. So I had my camera in one hand and I had my phone light in the other hand, and I was actually, you know, moving around the phone and taking pictures at the same time to try to get the best image. And I think they turned out okay. But after I realized that, you know, macro is better if you have your own light, I went onto Amazon and I bought a speed light for my camera. I bought the cheapest one possible. I think it's like $17 on Amazon, but now I use it for every single one of my macro photos. And it really, really has helped me improve my work drastically as far as the macro goes. And this is an example of practice. So what I'm not showing you guys is the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of awful pictures I've taken when experimenting with light and taking pictures. I'm only showing you the ones, you know, that I've kept and proud of. But trust me, there are tons. And that's something that I did with this this caterpillar here. It just took practice. It just took work, moving your light around and stuff like that. So I don't pretend like I'm an expert in lighting, because I'm not, but I understand the importance that lighting has on making an impactful image. And I think that's important to start thinking about. But our next topic, I would say, definitely had the most profound effect on my photography as far as the images that I liked. And I noticed that most well-known wildlife photographers practice these techniques that I'm going to show you, and it really makes their work more impactful in that is perspective. Before I start, Jay, are there any questions about that? Any other questions about lighting?
Well, there were just some. Do you have a preferred setting that you just kind of start with whenever you go out?
It all depends on the light. That's what I'm, you know, that's why, you know, you look at the different time of days. You want to expose your picture the best it possibly can, just depending on the light situations. You know how fast it can change here from, you know, these summer storms. They come in, it goes from almost looking like nighttime to just blazing daylight. So, you know, there's not really a starting point.
Okay. And for anybody that's just starting out, we had one question. Does it matter what camera? I'm assuming they're just saying, you know, are some cameras better than others, which I know that's yes, but what would you kind of say for someone just starting out?
Okay. So I'm just going to say, I heard this quote a lot. The best camera is the one that's in your hand. So the best camera is the one that you have with you. If that's your iPhone, and that's that. I mean, obviously you can go out and you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on camera equipment in a heartbeat. But what's more important than that is time with your camera in your hand. So taking advantage of every opportunity that comes your way, and then also understanding the camera that you have. You know, lots of people, they go out and they buy these $6,000 cameras and they never even turn it off of auto mode. So it's not beneficial to you if you don't understand your camera. When I got my camera, and I shoot with a Sony A7 III, if anyone is wondering, but I actually sat on the couch and I tried to change the settings on it blindfolded, like without looking at it, just so I knew when I had that camera that I could change things in the field on a fly. So it's really, really important to understand your camera and the different settings and what they do. I would say that's far more important than going out there and buying the nicest thing possible.
Okay. And this is kind of a simple one, I guess. How are you mounting the speed light? It says on the top, hot shoe, which I have no idea what that is, or off to the side.
Yeah, so you can do it two different ways, and I do it two different ways depending on my shooting way, but normally I do a hot shoe. But I do have a remote also that mounts into the hot shoe and then the bottom of the light. So the light is separate from the camera.
Okay. And this one, it just says aperture versus shutter speed or for wildlife while floating in a kayak.
Okay. So if you're floating in a kayak, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is fast enough to freeze the action and not be blurry. I'll talk a little bit about exposure theory at the end.
Okay, I'm gonna quiet down here and I'll let you get to it.
All right. So let's talk about perspective, and this is going to make your images way better than any kind of exposure theory. You got to get the exposure theory to get a sharp image, but perspective is going to have a much bigger impact on your photos. This photo of this little American alligator would not be the same photo if I was standing up shooting down on it. So this is really really important. As photographers, our primary purpose is to form a connection between the subject that we're taking and the intended audience. So whoever you're sharing your photos with would be your audience. And the best way to do that is through connection. You want to be in their world, just like this wood duck. You guys are going to tell by the end that I really like wood ducks. They're just so stunningly beautiful. Right. So the problem with, getting in their world is, lots of these animals are extremely fearful of us. They're wild animals, they have survival instincts. They're going to fly away or run away if you get too close. So how can we get into their world and not scare them away or become less threatening to them? And I'm going to say this is my favorite thing that happened with my photography personally to make it better, and that is getting on the ground. Your images will immediately improve if you get on the same level as your subject. But saying that, I, as a naturalist and birder, amateur birder, I'm nowhere near Jay's level, or lots of people, but I do like the birds. And so I understand if you see something new and something excited, just putting your camera right up to your face and taking that first picture just for an ID, just to say, hey, look what I saw, if you see an owl or something like that. And that's what happened with this northern water thrush. It was my first time ever seeing this bird. I was like, oh my goodness, that's a water thrush. So I took the picture, but then I started thinking about how can I improve this picture? If I just walked up to this bird to get closer to it, it's going to fly away. So what I actually did was I laid on the ground with this bird. And eventually, the birds become less fearful of you if you're smaller, have a smaller profile laying on the ground. I'm not a small person. I'm 6'4". So animals are scared of me until you lay down. And eventually this water thrush became so used to me laying there on the ground that it walked right up to me and it started feeding around me. And it was a really, really awesome experience to watch him feeding around me. And I got some great images. So that's my main advice is, if you have something that you're taking pictures of, either lay down or move your camera in your body. And this applies with every kind of photo. So many of us, if we see something pretty that we want to take a picture of, the first thing we do is we just raise our camera and take the picture just the way it is. And, that's fine, but you're going to get a lot more unique and powerful images if you move your camera a little bit. Take a sunset picture from the ground. It's going to look entirely different than every single sunset picture that you have seen, which is someone just holding their camera or their phone up to their face. And that's what I did with this pileated woodpecker. These birds are shy, so you don't get looks like this too often. But for some reason, this bird was just perfectly happy feeding away on this old snag. But the problem was it was a little bit high, and the picture I was taking was kind of its butt. So I actually stood there and I raised my camera as high as I could in the air and was just taking pictures away, just because I knew I wanted to get more on level with this bird and have a better picture. And that's the connection we're trying to look for. It's really helpful if you see the animal's eye. You know, we have such an opportunity to share these wonderful creatures that people don't have the opportunity to get close to. Like this water moccasin, I was taking this with a zoom lens, so I wasn't dangerously close to this this venomous snake. But that eye is super important in this picture because it forms that connection that we want so badly with our wildlife images. You might have heard that eyes are the windows to the soul, and that applies with animals too. So try these things. Try to get your eye in there. Another thing that laying on the ground does is it gives some more separation between the background and your subjects, just to kind of give it a little softer look with that background. And this was taken at Bear Island Wildlife Management Areas. My beautiful avocets. I love these birds too. They're so beautiful. But so that's that on perspective. And next thing we'll talk about is behavior. But Jay, you got some questions?
Yeah, and I agree. Those avocets are amazing birds. Yeah. So back to the macros. What size lens are you using with the macros for the macro photos?
Okay, so I have a 60 millimeter macro lens, and it's actually funny because that's my oldest lens that I have. It's actually a Canon lens, so it doesn't fit on my Sony, but I bought an adapter for it. But it doesn't have any kind of manual focus on that, so it's difficult to get some of the. I mean, it doesn't have any kind of autofocus. I'd have to manually focus it myself. But yeah, that's, again, the gear isn't everything. You can still get amazing. I mean, I think that lens is like 13 years old now. And I mean, we got it used. So you don't need the biggest of the best to get amazingly compelling images. I mean, some of the wildlife photographers that I follow are shooting with cameras that are 5 years older than mine. And some of their stuff still just blows me away because just the, getting to the animals and the perspective and the creativity that they have to make compelling images.
I love hearing that. So that means my golf game should be pretty good with my so, one question, you don't have to, say this now, but do you sell your photographs? The next question though, how far were you from that water thrush? And then we had another question that was, I guess in the same ballpark. How do you not scare the animals away? And obviously it's going to happen from time to time. You started after she asked the question, raising your hands and trying to get this picture. Speak to that. Whenever we see the pictures of that water moccasin or this ovenbird right here or that water thrush, I think immediately people think like, wow, was he 100 yards away or was he 10 yards away? So could you speak to that a little bit?
All right. So, I mean, it really depends on the photo. That water thrush was probably 5 feet away from my face when it was walking towards me. So one thing that I do, I always try to move slowly. I always am quiet. I do, try to wear neutral colors or camo if I have it. So that's what I'm doing if I'm just like walking through the woods looking for birds. Some animals are extremely skittish. Those wood ducks, I'm actually in a blind. So I'm actually completely concealed away from those wood ducks. So they can't see me, or if they do, they can't tell that I'm a person. Some of these pictures are taken from pretty far away. I do have a big zoom lens, and also I do crop a little bit after I'm done taking the photo. So this ovenbird here, I was fairly far away from, but that doesn't mean you can't get close. Sitting still is huge. It's amazing what you'll see. And this as a birder, if you go and sit in the woods for 30 minutes in the same spot without making any noise, you're going to see stuff you never would if you were just walking through the woods.
Yeah. I've said that same thing, probably the same way during my bird classes.
Yeah.
There's one question. It says, how do you find so many different animals or so many animals? And you're kind of speaking to that right now, but it makes me think of using eBird. So if I've never seen roseate spoonbill or an American avocet, I can go to South Carolina, look up eBird, look up that species, and find out where I can see that. Is there anything like that for reptiles, or anything else that you might want a picture of?
So I'm sure there is, but I'm going to say more important than anything, and you probably know this too, is time in the field. I'm out there all the time. If I have a day off, I'm not sleeping in. I'm up 4:30 going out to take pictures, and it's amazing. If you put in the time and you put in the energy, you're going to get repaid with these animals. But I also do use eBird to see where, potentially, but I'm an opportunistic photographer. I'm shooting whatever I find out there. And I think that just comes with a lot of time. And I actually talk about this pretty extensively in this next section on behavior.
Okay, and I'm gonna just squeeze in one more question and then on to behavior. But it says, do you ever shake when you take pictures? I seem to shake and then my picture is blurry. I'm saving up for a tripod.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about, with that exposure theory at the end with getting that shutter speed. But yeah, I do shake a lot, especially when I'm really excited. Some of my owl pictures I've ruined because I shake too. But try to breathe and try to time your pictures on your breathing, but make sure that your shutter speed is high enough that you can get a sharp image and it's not too blurry. All right, so let's move on to behavior. And I would just like to say that behavior, it automatically makes your picture more interesting. Excuse me, even if it's not in the best light or the best composition, people want to see behavior. They want to be in that animal's world and see them behaving naturally. So there's two big things to animal behavior I would like to talk about. And we've already briefly gone over one, and that is time. Time with the animals, you're going to get a lot more opportunities to take better pictures if you spend more time with that animal. And then understanding what they're doing, the behavior, and simply just watching them. So this was a good example of me watching this yellow-crowned night heron for a while. I probably watched this bird for a good 20 minutes before I even started making my way to it. So I was looking through binoculars, I was watching what it was doing, I predicted its behavior. It would look down in the rocks hunting for about 20 seconds, and then it would look up briefly for 2 to 3 seconds, scanning around it, making sure there's no predators. So once I understood its pattern, and birds especially are creatures of habit, they're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And if you understand that, you can predict and you can put yourself in a situation. So I waited for this night heron to look down in these rocks, and I actually army crawled along the beach towards it, stopping when I knew it was going to look at me and look around, and it didn't care. So I crawl a little bit further and a little bit further. I positioned myself, and I knew it was going to continue hunting, and I knew eventually it was going to catch a crab. But I did miss it a few times. But like I said, those birds have repetition. They do the same thing over and over again. So eventually I waited and I was able to get this shot. So be patient with these animals. They're doing their thing. They're natural, they're wild animals. They don't want you disturbing them. But if they don't think you're a threat, then they're going to let you get pretty close to them and get some good shots. So songbirds, and if you were like me when I first started taking pictures of songbirds, I went out and I was like, how in the world does anybody get pictures of these birds? They're so high energy. They're always bouncing around singing. But this goes back to the understanding patterns, and warblers especially have patterns. This common yellowthroat here on the left side, such a high energy bird, always moving around, never sitting still. But I saw that it coming back to this same branch again and again, and I'm assuming that it's like the edge of its territory, but it always come back to this branch. So I lined up a shot that I liked, and I waited for it. And just that 1 second that it was on this branch, I was able to get this shot. Prothonotary warblers are the same thing. They're going to be moving around, singing in the springtime, establishing their territory. So I was able to wait and get this shot. So let's talk about spending time with the animals now. And here are my wood ducks. And I would just like to say that I have spent more time with wood ducks than any other animals. And really, if you look through my photos, you'll see that I have the photos to, to show for it, spending so much time. Not only do you understand these animals more, but you form a connection. And I think that shows through your photos, because that's what we want. We want that connection. And this is a good example of, a picture that's not in fantastic lighting. It's not fantastically sharp, but just the interaction between this wood duck trait and this hen, it's just extremely sweet, and it automatically makes it a more powerful picture, as if it was just a simple duck in this subpar lighting. Again, my wood ducks, I spent hours and hours, day after day. And what that allowed me to do is it also allowed me to get a whole bunch of different lighting conditions and different behaviors in different places. So it really expanded my wood duck portfolio that way. And just coming back, there's something to be said about coming back. If you find one of those warblers, especially a prothonotary warbler, or one of those common yellow throats, it's going to be in relatively the same area. So you can come back and you can really start to understand what it's doing. And some of these animals are more, okay with you being around there. So it's all individuals. You might find an owl that doesn't care that you're there at all, and you can stand there and take pictures of it all day. Or you might find an owl that's going to fly away as soon as it sees you. So time with animals can really improve. And there you go again, my favorite wood duck couple. They're just so sweet together. And this is in a little bit better lighting where you can see more of that colors from the males. This is overcast lighting, but really sweet. And also spending time with these animals, then you can start to plan and think about what they're going to do. And you can put yourself in a position ahead of time and sit there quietly. Like I said, I was in a blind for these, so the wood ducks don't even know I'm there. I'm completely camoed out. But it allowed me understanding these wood ducks' daily habits to line myself up for a shot that I'm very proud of and that I've wanted for a while. And that was a wood duck flying directly at me with trees in the background. So I saw they would fly into the same place pretty much every day. So I put myself in position. And I got a lot of really bad shots, but I got this one that I was extremely pleased with. So, Jay, do we have any questions on that so far?
Well, it seems like people really want clear photos. So here we go, which I get. So one was lowest shutter speed when holding the camera for that clear shot, and what is too low?
Okay, so too low would be if you were getting camera shake. If you can't take a clear photo of a still object with it being sharp, then your shutter speed is probably too slow. There is a general rule that you want the shutter speed to be faster than your focal length. So if you're shooting with a 24 millimeter lens, you want your shutter speed to be above 1/25 of a second. So I shot this at 600 millimeters. So if I wanted a clear photo, I would want it to be faster than 1/600th of a second. But this animal, you've seen wood ducks fly. They're bullets through the air. They fly like 40 miles per hour. So I needed a really fast shutter speed. I shot this at 1/2000th of a second. But that being said, I can handhold my 600 millimeter camera at 1/30th of a second and still get sharp photos. There's things we could talk about like image stabilization in the camera and in your lens and stuff, but that stuff's a little technical. So if you have time at the end, we'll talk about that exposure theory just a little bit.
Okay. And then another, how do I get the camera to focus in time to get that clear shot? So, I love songbirds. I'm a songbird man, and boy, those things flit nonstop, it seems like. So I remember with my camera that I hung up about 2 years ago, You know, it had, I guess, an automatic one, and it drove me crazy. And it
Mm-hmm.
almost was like I wanted to just use a manual one, which my camera didn't have. So, you know, I know oftentimes when you shoot, you're probably not going to get it focused in time, but
Mm-hmm.
any tips there?
So I would say two things. Um, so if you are in the woods and let's say you're shooting those warblers, those songbirds, if you're taking a picture of one that's 500 feet away from you, and then all of a sudden there's one 15 feet away from you, moving that camera focus from that 500 to that 15 one is probably not going to be fast enough. The cameras just aren't that good at focusing. So what I do is I plan for my shots. Like I watch those behaviors of that warbler. I knew exactly where that yellowthroat was going to land. I focused on that stick before it landed. So when it flew in, it was already in focus. It was already sharp, and I just fired off the shots that I needed.
Man.
Another thing is understanding your camera. So most SLR cameras have different focusing modes. And if you learn those focusing modes and understand them, it's going to be a big benefit, and you'll understand the different situations that you can use those focusing modes into. But that's just too broad of a topic and too technical to go into in such a short class.
Okay. And just really quick back to the lighting. We've had this a couple times, but how do you shoot in lower light while getting the detail without all the noise?
Yeah, so that's exposure compensation. If you want lower light, you need to open up your open up your aperture as wide as it goes, and slow your shutter speed as slow as it can go without with still getting a sharp image.
Okay. And I thought this question was kind of cool. How do you accommodate for shooting in lower light? Oh, I'm sorry. We just asked that. How do you blur the background and focus on the subject?
Okay. That's understanding aperture in your f-stop of your camera. So that's a camera technical thing. I don't blur the backgrounds in my photos after the fact. These are all, how they come out of the camera as far as the background blurriness. And that's just understanding focal length and your aperture. And guys, I'm just going to tell you this. I taught myself all this stuff. It's all online. It's amazing the resources you can find online. If you go through those YouTube videos and go onto those websites, you can learn pretty much anything photography related that you want. But, take everything with a grain of salt, because like I said, most of it is personal preference. Oh, just one more thing on interaction. This is another image that was a product of me sitting very still and very quietly while I observed an owlet until the mom barred owl came and fed, and I got this really sweet intimate picture. So, again, not great lighting, but just the moment between the mom and this owlet just makes the picture, and it's very sweet. So that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about ethical wildlife photography. And this is a very simple and important concept for us as wildlife photographers. And it's just, your image is not more important than the health of the animal or its environment. And owls are a big discussion with ethical wildlife photography, because I'm sure you guys, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you've seen these amazing pictures of these owls hunting, coming right towards the camera. And I'm just going to tell you, most of the time, owls are baited. Those people are going to buy mice in the store and throwing them out for the owls. So I would just like to challenge you all as photographers and nature enthusiasts to take pictures that you're proud of. Take pictures of animals behaving naturally without you disturbing them. You can get some amazing pictures of owls still. This one was completely used to people, so it's see people all day long. It's in a popular park. So it's used to people, but don't endanger that animal. Don't chase that owl if you flush it. Don't chase that bird if you flush it, because all that's going to do is get you pictures of the bird's butt and ruin it for everyone else who comes along who wants to take pictures of that animal. So really stay quiet and stay. I'm a big believer in what you give, you get back. So when I go out into the woods, I try to be as respectful as possible to the animals in my environment. And typically, I get repaid with nice animal behavior, but don't go walking over dunes to get shots of nesting shorebirds, or trudge through the marsh that seems sensitive. Just get images that you're proud of and helpful. And that also goes to using our photos for good and for conservation. We have such a unique opportunity as wildlife photographers to share these moments with people who may never, get to experience these moments that we have in the wild. And, using your image for good can simply be telling someone you're showing it to, like, hey, these great egrets, they bounce back from almost extinction because people wanted to use their feathers for hats back when the U.S. was first getting a foothold. So it's really easy to spread a positive message with your photos. And we're giving a voice to the voiceless animals, purple martins that are only nesting now in east of the Mississippi and man-made nests. So I challenge you guys, spread your word, spread your positivity. We want good images that are that also serve a purpose. If you just share this picture, people might not know what they are. And I'm a huge believer in what we care about, we want to protect. And you inspire that care, and you inspire that love for something if you tell them about it and they know about it. Like this beautiful Kentucky warbler. I never knew that this bird was, in decline in our state until Jay put me on this bird and said, this is a bird that story needs to be told, and how it's a ground nester and losing its environment to habitat loss. But so with these tips and tricks that I taught you, perspective, getting low, getting impactful images, using the right kinds of lighting conditions and being aware of lighting conditions, start trying to make more complete and impactful photos, but then go out there and use those photos for good. So if we thought about it, I want you all to think back on when you can first remember being excited about nature or something outdoors or even photography. And I can almost guarantee you that if you think hard enough, it's going to be a certain image that you saw, a certain book that was full of images, a nature documentary that got you inspired and got you pumped up to pick up a camera and to go out there and try to capture some of these images. And so you could be that person, inspiring the next group of people to take good images. So thank you guys so much. I'm so happy so many of you guys joined with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. This was the first time I've ever did something like this. So I hope you guys get something out of it, and please feel free to ask any questions that you want. And if I don't cover something that you completely, understand, please feel free to reach out and email or connect with me on Instagram or Facebook. Like I said, photography is definitely a passion of mine, but it's also so in depth, and you can talk about it and argue about it and try different techniques for hours and hours and hours. So I'll try to answer all you guys' questions the best that I can now. So thank you guys.
Awesome, Vance. Thank you so much. One was you kind of hit on the conservation, aspect a bit, but it was kind of a question comment. But is it it's something that you can kind of document, even like sea level rise, climate change with? Are there folks that are out there that are even focusing on that?
Oh yeah, I would say the biggest group of so for pro wildlife photography, and just to note, I am not a professional wildlife photographer. This is just a hobby of mine. But I would say for professional wildlife photography, there's two big fields, and those are educators who are teaching wildlife photography, and then there are the conservation photographers, and that's with all the National Geographic photographers. They're not out walking around taking pictures of whatever they see. They're trying to tell a story and trying to document a story.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Okay. Back to the actual camera. How can I have no idea. How can I fix banding in my photos?
So banding is mostly a problem that comes to videos, but if you're experiencing it in your photos, it's probably something that you're doing after the fact. So if you're doing a lot of post processing, um, you might get some banding. Also, if you're like uploading it onto Facebook, Facebook and Instagram have these compression algorithms that actually like crush the data in your photos down, and that can cause some banding. Um, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question. I would say, look at your post processing, make sure your sensor is clean, so you're not getting any banding. Yeah, and that's about as best I can answer that question.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And I'm assuming the wood duck flying kind of prompted this question, but are you rapid firing or burst moding there?
So, I shoot on a, full auto. If I hold the camera button down, it's going to fire constantly. But that's only, so much because, the memory cards, the technology isn't there where you can just hold it down forever. I mean, it is with the nicest cameras. I don't have the nicest camera out there. So I try to burst because especially with that wood duck flying in, like I talked about, setting up and predicting, I knew I wouldn't be able to focus it on the whole time. And I want to be ready for another opportunity as it comes. So I would say I do burst more because I want to see what I'm taking a picture of. And I don't want just that black shutter, constantly moving in front of me when I'm in a situation where the bird is doing something cool and having some good behavior.
Okay. Um, and this is a good one from Meredith. Are there certain photography educators on YouTube you would suggest to follow for beginners?
Yes. So there is a YouTube channel. It's done by this guy, Scott Keys. He's actually an amazing photographer, but the YouTube channel is called Wildlife Inspired. And I've learned so much from that. He sits down with other amazing wildlife photographers and just, goes through it from front to end. I mean, there is hours. Each show is like an hour long, but Wildlife Inspired is a big one. If you're looking to understand strobes more, there's a website called Strobist, and that's really good. As far as educators, also Ray Hennessy has a YouTube channel that I've learned a lot from. He does some behind the scenes stuff, and he does some tutorials on post processing as well. Getting the colors and fixing some issues in your stuff. So, look out there. I just started the way anyone else would, and I just Googled wildlife photography and went from there and discovered these guys. But there's, like I said, there's so much online, so much.
And Shannon just popped that YouTube channel out on the chat. So if anybody wants to go to that YouTube channel, just click on it. I just did it. It'll take you directly to that. So appreciate that, Vance.
Yeah. And you'll see they're broken down into, composition and, understanding. I think he has one on gear and exposure theory, and he talks through, and he does a pretty good job explaining that stuff.
Okay. Let's see. One of the ones that I didn't get to, and I'm sure you might have covered it, but do you usually shoot with a long lens?
Yeah, so I for my birds, I'm shooting with the Sony 200 to 600 lens, and that's a 5.6 through 6.3 aperture lens. So it's not the biggest and the best, but it's a versatile lens for wildlife photography. Lots of people think, the longer the better, but I've found that I like my images more, even if I'm not at that 600 all the way. I would say, what more important than that is how you're composing your pictures. Like this picture that's on the screen right here, I could have zoomed in right up to that bird, and it wouldn't nearly be as an impactful image because I really like the perch that it's on, those leading lines up to that image. And that's, understanding composition and artistic elements a little bit.
So cool. You talked about Bear Island and Donnelly. Where are some other places, some of your favorites that you like to visit around here?
Around here, so
South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe.
yeah, so I do live in Lexington. So Congaree is my go-to, and Congaree Creek, you saw me out there. I love Bear Island. I love Donnelly. Getting down to the coast, there's something magical about all those wading birds on those shark flats. Huntington State Park is just absolutely out of this world when it comes for wildlife. I also love the mountains. I go up to, you get different species up there. So it really depends. If you can go to the mountains right now when it's super hot, that's great. But also understanding goes back to the naturalist. And I know you guys have, lots of great classes on naturalists and bird behavior and stuff like that. But, they're going to be in different areas. You can't go to one place and get everything that you want if you're targeting certain species.
Yeah, and there's some great game management properties around here. Congaree Creek is a heritage preserve from DNR, so Congaree Creek Heritage Preserve, Watery River Heritage Preserve, those are all DNR properties. So if you just kind of Google that or look up DNR, you can find some free places to go to that can be amazing. A pretty in-depth one right here. I think the Sony is a mirrorless camera. Without one of those, do you worry about mirror noise? Say for the close wood duck shots, those had to be close even with a 600 millimeter lens.
Yeah, so that's a pretty technical question, and it is something that I don't have to worry about. But noise is still a big thing. If you're getting that close and that nice separation, you want to make sure that you're shooting with the lowest ISO as possible. I'm not too familiar with mirror noise because as soon as the Sony released their mirrorless bodies, that's what I jumped on with right away. So I didn't do too much shooting on a mirrored camera, but I'll just talk a little bit about exposure theory. And this is something that you can go into super depth with, but there's three main things that control the amount of light that's coming into your camera. And that is shutter speed, aperture or f-stop, and ISO. ISO is digital lightness. So if you're in a really dark area and your camera's shutter speed or f-stop can't compensate, it's going to raise the ISO, and that's going to give you digital brightness. But the downside of that is if you raise your ISO too high, you're going to get really grainy images. So you want to make sure your aperture is low as possible. Not only does that let more light in, so as low as possible means your camera lens is opening up as wide as it can. So this is a high aperture, and then this is a low aperture. What that also does is it creates that, blurry background if your aperture is more open. So there's that. And then the shutter speed. And the shutter speed, just think of it as like your eyeball blinking. And that's the amount of time that light is coming through that aperture onto your camera sensor. So if you're shooting, at 1/200th of a second and it's a flying bird, however much that bird moves in that 1/200th of a second, which is a lot more than you think it is, you're going to see as blur. So that's what happens when your camera is shaking. Just that little shake in that 1/200th of a second or 1/100th of a second is going to cause that blur. So you want there to be a balance between all three. And there's a great YouTube video. I think it's called like Everything You Need to Know About Photography in 10 Minutes on YouTube. And it's about exposure theory. And he does a good job of explaining it. I can't remember the name of the exact video, but if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and I can put you on some good resources for it.
And is the graininess and the blurriness, is that what noise is?
Yeah, so noise refers to the grain in the photos.
Okay. Any other questions? I think you've again broken records on the thank yous and the wonderfuls. So I'm a little jealous, but I knew it was going to happen. Any more questions, y'all? We still have almost 100 people with us that have stayed on. I know, Vance, you probably have to get back to work, but I don't.
It's all good.
Here, let's see. How many pictures do you trash to get the good pictures?
Oh, I mean, it really depends. Sometimes I go out and I take, 1,000 pictures and I don't like any of them, and it depends. And wildlife photography is like that. It's opportunity, it's going to come, it's going to go. Sometimes I go out and I get tons of great stuff. And other times I just go out and it's either, not lighting or bad lighting or no animals. So that just goes back to the time in the field.
Okay. Appreciate that. This video will be posted, and we'll send a link to that later. Let's see. How do you get texture and maybe define texture in close-up photos?
So you get texture in close-up photos by making sure you're here. We can go to you mean like, I guess like this, like a close-up photo. How do I get those details? That's just really making sure that your image is sharp. You want your subject to be in focus. So for this one, a little bit technical side of it, I actually increased my aperture up to f11, which means it's a little bit more closed, but it gives me more a bigger focal plane. So that image in there, and you can see. We'll go to this one. So this one, you can see my aperture was open all the way, and that's why it's just the face of the bird is sharp, and it immediately melts away after that. Because as those subjects get closer, your focal plane is going to decrease. So everything outside of that focal plane is going to be a little bit blurry. So it's really important that you're getting sharp images, and so sharp and in focus images.
Wow. And just one more time, I think people are going to be buying your combo that you use here, but the camera and the zoom lens that you use, what is it again?
So I shoot with the Sony A7 III, which is actually, in the photography world considered, an older camera now. They're actually a great deal. I just looked up their prices and I was upset, with what mine costs versus what they are now. But that's just, technology. If you buy the iPhone 7 now or whatever, it's going to be much cheaper than the newest best thing. But that's just the way technology works. So I shoot with the Sony A7 III, and then I shoot with the Sony 200 to 600 zoom lens.
This is just a thank you. I actually look forward to messing with my camera and sitting in the yard and watching the birds.
Yes. I would say that is such an underrated thing when it comes to wildlife photography. You have to be there to get the picture. You can sit there all day long and say, oh man, how do you get these amazing photos? But, I didn't start out taking these pictures. I sat there and I learned, and I failed over and over again taking these pictures. And, if you've been out with me before, I sit there and sometimes I'm just like, man, I suck at this. Like I can't get a clear picture for anything, but I'm stubborn, and I spend time and I observe and I try to learn the best I can. And, I try not to make excuses for myself. 6 a.m. Saturday, I'm not sleeping in. I'm there, I'm with the birds, and, I'm out there taking pictures. If you go out, get out as much as you can. I know people have jobs and families and stuff like that. I'm lucky that I'm young and single, so I have so much free time, but take advantage of the opportunities you have. And, we talk about these amazing places that we have in South Carolina, these beautiful wildlife refuges, but you don't need to go far to take a good picture. There's great pictures to be had in your backyard. You don't have to go there. And if you have, 15, 30 minutes to mess around with your camera, even if you're just watching TV, start learning what some of those settings are. I mean, it took me a long time to learn my camera well, but once I did, I know how to change the settings in the field, and I started missing less and less shots.
Thank you for that. Let's see here. Man, a lot of thank yous.
I'm going to interrupt really quickly. We actually have an amateur photography contest every year, and it is actually going to be launching tomorrow. The deadline to submit your photos, we have 3 different categories, is October 31st. So you've got time to take the information that you learned from Vance today and get out there and take some shots and enter them in our contest. I'll drop that link in the comment section as well.
We might have to stop Vance from entering so other people can enter.
I entered last year. And I didn't win anything. No, there's some great stuff. It's, we have such a beautiful state and such amazing opportunities. So absolutely submit to that contest. I love, and that's one thing I love, photos, and, show me any pictures that you have. And I love looking through all those contest entries when you get them. It's amazing what people can do, what opportunities people see, and how they deal with them differently. Each photographer obviously is different in what they do in different situations, and I really like to see that and learn from that.
Well, hopefully we'll see a little uptick in people entering, just getting kind of fired up through this class. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, don't get discouraged. It takes practice, just like anything else, like any hobby or skill. It takes practice. You're not just gonna watch 1 hour-long video and go out and take National Geographic award-winning photos. It takes some work, and I work hard at it, and it's something I'm always trying to improve too, and I'm always trying to find something to elevate my photography further for me personally.
Yeah, no, well said. Do you have a setting for sharpness on your camera? ? If so, where do you set it?
No.
Okay.
Oh, well, so this is one of those things. So I've only ever shot with the Sony. I know that in some different cameras, there's actually like a number where you can sit 1 through 10, like on your camera body. I think I'm not sure if Nikon does it, but there's like an image sharpness, and I don't really know. I would probably leave it on whatever default, because what that's doing is digitally sharpening your photos and pictures. But mess around with it. You can go outside in your yard and take pictures of a flower and change those settings, and then go onto your computer and look at them and decide which one that you like the most. And that's what I would do. And that's pretty much what I do with all my camera settings.
Okay. Hey, and we still have a bunch of questions. Vance is, working today, and we're at 1 hour, 15 minutes. So I just want to say thanks to everybody. Vance's email and contact information is right there. So if you have any other questions, please email him. If you have any questions about bird, email me. But if you have any questions
he's the bird guy.
Vance, do not email me. Thank you, Vance. The best class that we've had. Wonderful. Appreciate your time and your enthusiasm and your expertise. And if anything else that you'd like to say, say it. If not, we'll end the meeting.
Well, thank you guys so much. Just be sure to get out there and practice and shoot and take pictures, and most importantly, enjoy yourself. Enjoy the beautiful outdoors that we have.
All right, guys. All right, y'all have a good day. Thanks for attending. All right, Vance. Thank you, buddy.
So much.
All right, man.